Hi guys, and welcome to Darkwood Bushcraft. This is a quick video on carving, more specifically on carving spirals. I was asked yesterday if I could do a quick tutorial on how to carve the spirals that I put into my spoons. So of course, yeah, no problems at all. So yesterday's video we did a tri-stick with the big old ESEE 5, so I thought I'd mix it up a bit today, and today we're going to go to the other end of the scale and use the ESEE Candiru. This is one of the smaller knives that they produce. It's the same steel, 1095, but I thought it might make a little bit of a difference just to make it a bit more interesting and a bit of a comparison with what we did yesterday. So let's give it a go. Okay, so for the sake of this video, again I'm going to leave the bark on the branch. This is just so that it's much easier for you to see what's going on visually than if I take the bark off. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a short spiral going from here to here on this branch, just so that you can see how to do it. Now, in a previous video where we did the tri-stick, one of the notches that we did was the V-notch, and this features quite heavily when you're doing a spiral. Essentially a spiral is just a spiraled V-knot that goes from one end of your area you want to spiral to the other. So like with the V-knot, we're going to start by putting in a stop cut, and I'm going to put this in at about 45 degrees, and I'm just going to follow the direction of the blade going around the branch all the way to the top of where I want to go. So if we head back to the bottom, and what we're going to do is we're going to start taking out the material, and as you can see we're starting to create that spiral pattern. Now I'm only going to do a little bit at a time, because obviously this is quite a complex carve. So what you don't want to do is try and take too much material out at once, because if you do slip and have to start the whole thing again, that could be quite a lot of time wasted. So as you can see, we've got the spiral going from one side to the other. Now, and here's the trick, obviously that's quite a loose spiral, and that's what's going to happen when you set up at about 45 degrees. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a double helix. So we're going to start another spiral opposite the first one. So I'm going to turn it around, start opposite the first one, and I'm going to go with my stop cut up the middle. And as you can see, it goes right up between the other parts of the spiral. So I'm going to do the same with this one, and I'm just going to take out those little slivers of wood up to the stop cut, just so that you can start to see visually what we are creating here. Now, if you really want a super tight spiral, which we're not going to do today, you can put a third and a fourth helix in going up, which will divide it again. But I think for the sake of this one, 2 is enough. So we've got our 2 different spirals in, which gives us our twist in our piece of wood. We've gone from one side of the stop cut, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go the other side of the stop cut, so that we're starting to create that V-notch that we did on the tri-stick. There aren't many of these projects that can't go back to something that you've done on a tri-stick. It's a really handy little exercise, the tri-stick, in learning all your different cuts and notches. So let's go back to the second of the 2 spirals, and we're going to go in there as well. Right, so we've got a fairly crude V-notch going all the way around from top to bottom of where we want the spiral to be. So all I'm going to start doing now is exactly what we did with the V-notch on the tri-stick. I'm just going to start cutting it in and making it deeper. Now the next mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to doing spirals is they don't do it anywhere near deep enough, and what you then end up with is just like a little gouge going around your spoon. It doesn't look like a spiral as such. So we need to get that V-notch in reasonably deeply. Up to the end. So I'm going to go back to the beginning on the same notch again, and now what I'm going to do is just going to start to round that edge off. So it's, instead of a V, we're rounding the top off and we're just dropping into that, the bottom of that V. And what we're starting to do here is starting to create a cross section on these pieces that is rounded, and that's going to be what gives us our spiral, and stops it looking like a scratch going up and round your branch. So we're going to try to avoid having any flat surfaces by the time we finish. So I'm just slowly rounding this off. Now I'm going to do the other notch. So everything you do, and this is what's time consuming, has to be done on 2 notches from the bottom and from the top. So you've effectively got 4 different surfaces you're working on constantly. So I'm going to do these 2 notches from the bottom. So we're currently on the second notch that runs up there. And for the sake of the video, this is all a little bit crude. I would spend a little bit longer obviously doing this if I was doing it on something ornamental. Right, so I'm now going to turn it around and I'm going to do the same thing from the other side. So I'm dropping into that notch, I'm rounding off my surfaces. And as you can see, once you start working from both directions, it soon starts to round off those flat planes to the point where it starts to look much more like a spiral. and the second notch. Now, as I mentioned earlier, yesterday's video on the tri-stick was done with the big old ESEE survival knife, whereas we're using the Candiru today, which is surprisingly has a lot of punch for its size. It's actually a great little knife. I carry it fairly regularly as a neck knife, and it's a very versatile little bit of gear. And in the same way as the ESEE manages to do work that you wouldn't expect from such a big knife, this one can do knife work that you wouldn't expect from such a small knife. I've quite successfully battened through reasonable sized wood with this. It's a good solid bit of gear, and you don't even know you're wearing it when it's around your neck. So we've got the spiral in its crudest form now. So now all we need to do is just to start tidying that groove up a little bit. So making sure we're constantly cutting into the same place. That gives that illusion that you've got two circular bits wrapped around each other. So the neater you can make that groove between the two, the more convincing your spiral will be. So we dig that little cut in and make sure that it's neat and consistent. If it tends to run off and you don't have that, like it's kind of doing here, it's not quite as convincing as if you can get a nice crisp solid looking gouge in there between the two, with a nice little corner in it, so it looks like the two bits of wood are separate. And obviously the more time you spend on this, the better it's going to look. Like I say, this is all pretty crude at this stage. So that's this one done. And you can see the difference straight away between these two and these two. So let's just quickly cut this one in a little bit. This is one of those shapes that it's very satisfying to carve, because it's fairly straightforward to do, but the effect that it gives is great, and it gives you quite a lot of grip and texture as well. So it's a nice one to do on things like walking poles and stuff like that as well. I went through a period several decades ago where all of my walking poles were hazel, and they all had these spirals carved into the top of them. And it was a bit of a tradition for a while. Whenever I took anybody out camping or bushcrafting or something, I would cut them a staff, and I would make them this spiraled walking pole to take away with them. So, like I say, it's all a bit crude at the moment. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to round off those tops, that last little bit. Just to make sure that it's not too flat and doesn't look too artificial. Okay, that's one. Two, turn it around. Number 3. And then last one. Trimming all those corners off. Again, back to the tri-stick. This is just using the same method that we used to round the end off the stick. It's one of the first notches that we did. So there you go. It's, like I say, fairly crude, but that is essentially how you carve a spiral. Keep well, guys, look after one another, and happy trails.